going on, guys, and welcome to my long overdue review of Bad Boys Ride or Die, the fourth in this franchise, and it's a franchise that I of course loved since the original. Lots of nostalgia for Bad Boys 1 and 2. Bad Boys for Life I had fun with. It's a little bit of a different take, a little bit of a different flavor, but I still had fun with it. And it made a ton of money, so of course number 4 was inevitable. So Bad Boys Ride or Die's plot basically follows Mike, Lowrey, and Marcus Burnett, who attempt to clear their late Captain Conrad Howard's name after he is falsely accused of conspiracy. In doing so, Mike and his son and Marcus go on the run as they become targets themselves. So I watched the first one of these films way back when I was in high school, even before 2 had come out, had even hit theaters in 2003. So I would say probably around 2001 or 2002 is when I got introduced to them, to the first one. And I've been a loyal follower ever since. Then Bad Boys for Life rolled around 17 years later. Really? And I liked it. Didn't quite hit me the same way that Bad Boys 2 for sure did. But it was fun. So was Ride or Die any different? Did it blow my top off? Did it blow my mind? Or was it just a plain dud? Starting off with the positives, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence were gold. They hit every mark. They hit every cue. You know that saying goes, better with age? 100% applies here. Like I said, Bad Boys for Life was good, but I felt like they amped it up a notch for Ride or Die. Because the jokes to me, and I know a lot of people are saying otherwise, which I kind of understand why, but for me, I'm just the oddball out. For me, all the jokes landed, mostly from Lawrence. Will Smith had his moments. He's a funny guy. He definitely had his moments in Ride or Die, but every time Martin Lawrence opened that mouth of his, it always got a giggle out of me. It was pretty much a prelude to a forthcoming giggle leading on to a laugh every time he spoke. The man didn't even have to try to be funny. Every time he says something serious, I just couldn't help it. And I know that's kind of silly to say, but I'm sorry. The man is just a comic legend. And I just hate that we hadn't seen that much of him before Bad Boys for Life.
Want to deal with him? You want to deal with me?
Sorry, sir, but I gotta go. Call 911.
Aren't you the police?
Like I said, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, they both delivered, but Martin Lawrence, he made me laugh the most. And like I said, Martin Lawrence's absence is kind of making me sad. There could be a reason why, I don't know why, but since 2010, or 2011, which was, I believe, his last theatrical outing in Big Mama's Like Father, Like Son, and after that, I just hadn't heard anything from the man until Bad Boys for Life came out in 2020. He's just one of those that kind of fell off the radar, and I hope that this kind of brings him back. He needs a resurgence. You know, you need a resurrection, dude. Give us some of that Martin Lawrence genius that you once had, that you once burst out of from the 90s on to the early 2000s. We need it. But again, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence were gold. They still had that goofy charm about them. Some may say a little bit too goofy, but forget all that. Sillier the better for me. I thought they played off each other very well. They're absolute gold. And I already forgot, what slap, what Oscar slap, I mean, what? Will Smith, you're already forgiven in my eyes. You've been forgiven for a long time now. Just keep on doing what you're doing, man. The action here was astonishing. After the first 30 or 40 minutes, which I'll get into later, it never let up. Now, I've stated many times when I have reviewed action movies, preferably about Michael Bay, on how much of a fan I am of his films. I said this many times, I'm a huge fan of Michael Bay's stuff. That Bayanism just sticks with me every time. The directors of this film, who directed the last one in the very ill-fated Batgirl, they did a really good job for Bad Boys for Life, but in Ride or Die, they definitely upped it several notches. I felt some of the Bayanism there, particularly with some of the drone shots that they used. And that's one thing that Michael Bay is very famous for. He uses drone shots in his action sequences about every time. And here, they use it. It's not quite the same. It's probably a little bit amplified, but after watching it, especially by the third act, I could have swore I was watching a Michael Bay movie. You could have swore that Michael Bay probably had some inspiration, even though he wasn't in the director's chair. I could have swore he was whispering to the directors of this film his inspiration just a little bit. But the directors, who I will not name, I know I will mispronounce their names, they did a really good job. They definitely knew what they were doing. They definitely knew how to handle the basis of action scenes. It was fast-paced, gripping. I loved it. Every second of it. And you have a really great story here. You basically have our two main protagonists because they're trying to clear their friend's name, and as a result becoming targets themselves, which makes them go on a run. They get bounties put on them. And I thought it was a really great way to keep the story fresh, to keep the franchise fresh. It's something that these characters have not really experienced in any of the other films. All the other films, they were the 100% heroes. But here, they're fugitives. And I thought it was very interesting. It was a very cool, fresh take to get to this point, especially at this point of this franchise by the fourth film. And it definitely kept me invested. It definitely kept me on the edge of my seat, and I was like cheering for him the whole way, the whole time. And it just kind of amplified that feeling within myself as well. And finally, I love how they kept the nostalgia alive without beating you over the head with it. It was very much alive here, mostly from the first two. You see a little glimpse of pieces of that in Bad Boys for Life, but for Bad Boys Ride or Die, it actually lets you know that this one's definitely connected to the others, especially those first two. I just liked how they kept all that alive. They just reminded us that, hey, this is connected to the other events, even Bad Boys for Life. It's not being forgotten. It's not going to be thrown away completely. This is not a new movie. It is a sequel, but with a fresh take. It definitely did some interesting things here, most notably one character, which I won't get into that much, but I will say his name, Reggie. Yeah.
You need to get a job.
I'm a U.S. Marine, sir.
Well, then you need to deploy.
It was definitely interesting. I love how they played that out. I love how they handled that. It was handled with such delicateness and simplicity, to where every time when a scene had popped up that reminds us that, hey, remember this, remember that, I just about got out of my chair and cheered. So yeah, that was definitely aces in my book. Moving on to my mixed, I always thought it was kind of weird that the girl that they got to play Marcus's wife, Martin Lawrence's character's wife, in Theresa Randall, was replaced by Tasha Smith. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a bash on Tasha, but I just thought it was weird. For some unknown reason, she was recast, and she has more of a part in this. I'd say about the same amount of screen time she did in the original Bad Boys, which made it feel kind of off. Again, not a bash on Tasha Smith. I think she did a good enough job to what she was given. But there's no explanation as to why she was recast in the first place. Now, there was speculation of people speculating that they saw her walk down the street with a cane. So there might have been health issues, or Theresa Randall just didn't really want to act anymore. There could have been a number of reasons. But because she was recast and she had more of a speaking part, again, not a bash on Tasha Smith, but I just thought it was kind of off, and it just felt weird. Moving on to my negatives, the first 30 or 40 minutes of this film. And as much as I loved this movie, I can't ignore the elephant in the room. Now, be in mind, these are just little tiny nitpicks. This isn't going to affect the outcome of my rating of this film, because it's going to be good. And you can probably tell what it's going to be by now. So these are very small negatives. But most of the things that I did find negative about this, which I was kind of debating on whether to do this review completely different by putting the negatives first, because it did feel like the negatives came first within the first act of this film compared to the rest of the film, which was all positive. But I didn't. First off, and there's possible spoilers, but I'm going to try to keep this as lit tight as I can. Something happens to Marcus Lawrence's character that kind of sort of took it in a little bit of a supernatural way, a supernatural take. Now, you could say one part of it kind of did pay off later on, but to me it just felt weird. I felt like that they kind of went a little bit off track watching it. It's the only time in this film that I kind of had a look on my face like this. What? I just felt like they went a little bit too off track with that, especially considering the type of films that these are and the track record that they have with its tone. Mind you, it didn't really happen that much, but it just felt weird to me. Last but not least, I told you it wasn't that much in the negatives. You don't really get that much from the villains. There's really nobody to remember. Of course, none of the Bad Boys villains was really standoutish. Here is no different. They did feel a little bland. They did feel a little weak. It's just nothing to really write home about, honestly. I know I really don't have to say this, but despite those little nitpicks, because they were nitpicks to me, I had a blast. And I'm not just saying this just because it's the newest one out there, but I think Ride or Die is possibly the best one yet. And yes, I am saying that knowing full well how I feel about Michael Bay's Bad Boys 2. And I do think Ride or Die is the best one that they've made thus far. So if you're a Bad Boys fan and are expecting a lot of action jokes and plenty of Martin Lawrence and Will Smithism, you've come to the right place. Go out and own this movie. So Bad Boys, Ride or Die, what was your thoughts on it? Have you seen this yet? Are you a fan of this franchise? Were you a fan of this growing up? Were you a fan of those original two and seeped into Bad Boys for Life and this one? Or are you somebody that just never really cared for this franchise? Are you somebody who just shrugged it off? Leave me a comment down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. Make sure to click that bell icon so you don't miss a thing. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.